Okay, so step 3 is how do we do other basic shapes? Because if you wanted to do a number of buildings or things like that, you start with your basic rectangles, squares, things like that. So we're going to start with a square at first because I think it's a little bit easier to understand, and then we'll do a little bit more of a complex shape, and then we'll do some overlapping shapes as well so you can see how things can eventually progress. So we're just going to do, and you can freehand a square. You can use a ruler if you want to. A trick is to just take the top of your ruler so that way you know you have a 90-degree edge and just flip it. So that way you can draw your square. Okay, so once you have your square on your paper, what I like to do, especially when I'm first starting this unit, is map out where are the edges, where are the corners on every side of your square. And then you're going to connect the dots. You're going to connect these dots to your vanishing point because everything converges back to that vanishing point. The only exception is you won't draw it if something is in front of it. So I'm going to definitely draw this front corner because I would see the side of this box. I would see this side as well. I would see the top of this cube going back into the distance, but I don't see this converging line because I have the surface of the cube in front of it. So you can see how things recede back into the distance. If I wanted to make this more of a freestanding shape, then what I'm going to do is then I'm going to incorporate my parallel lines. So I'm going to line up my first line, my first side with the right hand side here, and I'm just going to slide my ruler back so I can ensure that I'm getting a pretty close to parallel line from here to here. And then from that point, I'm going to take my pencil again. I'm going to line up my ruler from the top of this cube. I'm going to slide it back to where that corner meets here. And I'm going to add in a second line. So now I have more of a freestanding shape that goes back into the distance, and I can erase those additional converging lines. So again, it's always a good idea to draw lightly when we are working with 1-point perspective, just because you will be erasing a lot of the converging lines because they don't continue forever. We're going to talk a little bit more about line weight. So the front of this surface, since I see that from my perspective, I'm going to make those lines a little bit bolder, a little bit heavier, if you will. So if I have a thicker line, the weight of that line is a little bit thicker. So you hear me say weight of line often with 1-point perspective. And I'm exaggerating this a little bit more just because I want to make sure the concept is driven home. Okay, so then my lines that recede back into the distance, they're not going to be as thick or as bold as those ones, but we are going to add some value here. If my light source is coming from the back, the top of this is going to be the lightest. The side of this is going to be a middle tone, and my back side is going to be darkest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some shading. Again, if you use the side of your pencil and you make little ovals, you'll be able to get a more gradual and even look. You won't have to blend with your finger, and it'll give it a more realistic feel. You have more control over that shading. Okay, and then I'm going to do my middle tones on the side. Notice I'm changing kind of the direction of how I'm shading because this is going back in the same direction. And then the top of the box is going to remain light.